My name is Jareh. I'm a curator, writer, and researcher based between London and different cities across West Africa specifically. I'm an early riser. I wake up at 5:30, between 5:30 and 6 every morning. I really like to wake up at this time because it's, for me, depending on where I'm at, which city I'm in. I don't even have an alarm. My body clock is just like, "Ooh," and I'm up. I like to start my day before everybody else. I like the stillness of the morning. I like to wake up and have a spiritual practice, pray, meditate. And then I go into a short exercise session before the whole world wakes up and catches up with you. So this is what I do every morning. I also start my day with coffee. I'm now moving into the decaf coffee vibe, but I have to have a cup of coffee after I've gone through this reflective spiritual time in the morning, after exercise as well, because it doesn't help to do it the other way around. That's first thing. I want to clear that email backlog. I want to see, what's coming, what I need to attend to, prioritize what is important. And then I crack on with my to-do list. In terms of the kind of space I'm in, when I'm in London, I live by myself, which is really quite nice and a luxury. I'm very grateful that I can live alone, given the economics of living somewhere like London. I have plants. I don't have any pets because I can't stand just any little thing scraggling around that I have to look after or clean up after. So there's plans to bring a bit of nature in. I'm not big on breakfast, to be honest. So it's starting the day with coffee, getting straight into work. Depending on what I'm working on, there's a lot of research time also. So sometimes I will be out in a library or I'm sort of reading, working from home. Yes, I'm just depending on, what's coming up. It's usually a sort of very research heavy day, a lot of reading, a lot of writing, meetings that come into following up if there's a curatorial project. But most of the time, predominantly, I'm writing and researching. So a lot of quiet solitude time that could be at home, working from home, or in a library close to me. So that's typically what my days are like, actually. Yeah, I'm trying to be more disciplined. Because I wake up so early, it doesn't help for me to have the late nights. As I said, I've got into this routine, probably a routine that was not helped by the amount of coffee I was drinking when I was younger. I'm also deeply affected by light as well. So when it's somewhere that, the sun is rising early, before that sunrise, my body clock is already waking up. So I am sort of trying to go to bed on the early side, 9:30, 10. I really want to switch off and just settle down because I know that I have this rhythm that, I wake up so early and it's it doesn't help if I'm staying up later because it's cutting into the amount of sleep time that I should have. So when that happens, I'm still up. I have a more sort of lethargic flow to the day. So I really try and discipline myself to go to bed early. Yeah, I really try to finish work at 5:30 every day. I really sort of I'm very meticulous about that, unless there are circumstances beyond my control. There's a deadline. I'm working with a different time zone where I have to. Mostly it's the calls that sort of extend my day if I'm working with organization individual in a different time zone. But really by 5:30 I want to switch off. I don't want to look at emails. I don't want to look at screens. I don't have a TV. I don't really have this habit of jumping on the internet because I'm spending so much time writing and reading that I really want to rest my eyes. I don't want to really look at Netflix or anything. I sound very boring, but it's just more for my sanity. I spend so much time looking, reading, thinking that really at the end of the day, it's, really a time to switch off. It's a time to speak to family. It's time to see family. It's a time to socialize, or it's a time just to really pick up a book and read. I'm very interested in this, having these firm boundaries between my work and outside of work life that really is in this constant overstimulation. I'm not on Instagram. This is part of the reason why I took off social media, because between looking at screens, looking at WhatsApp messages, it becomes too much because you do get into that. Personally, I used to get into that cycle of I'll switch off and then I'll jump on Instagram and there's all of these things related to art or artists having conversations. And that would also drag me into this never quite switching off. And I think it's important to have these, as I said, boundaries between work and non-work life. It's healthier, it makes you more productive. It makes the work you do more grounded, having these boundaries between work and non-work. Right. This is a really interesting one, especially for Nigerians, because when I left Nigeria in 1999, such a long time ago, to come to England, I was on this trajectory post QC to become an engineer, a computer scientist. My A levels were in the hard sciences, physics, math, chemistry. I think for me, I'm really sort of, in the last couple of years, I've been reflecting on what that transition from Nigeria to the UK was like. I wasn't in London, I was in Newcastle upon Tyne, which is a city up north where I was born. It was such a huge shift for me coming to the UK. And I'd always been told actually that I was going to become an engineer, a computer scientist by my parents. So I just followed that path. I found myself in Newcastle. I found myself having to be independent for the first time in my life as a 17-year-old. And I really struggled. I missed home. I missed my parents. I missed my siblings so much. And it was weird because like all of the sciences that felt so familiar became so unfamiliar in this context. First of all, I couldn't even understand the accent. If you know anything about Newcastle, you know that people speak with this really strong Geordie accent. And I was just like, what is this? I cannot actually, I have a Geordie dictionary from my 1999 transition to Newcastle. I was like, what are they actually saying? So even sort of, I don't know, I just found it such a huge cultural shock that my grades suffered. I did get into university. I did scrape into Newcastle University to study computer science. But I think at that point, after 2 years of, really sort of struggling, trying to get adjusted into this UK system, I just really felt like I was clinging on. I got onto the course. I was really trying my best. I still wasn't quite plugged into what I imagined this degree to be. And then randomly, I was working part time in a bar restaurant, and somebody else who was there was studying history of art. And I said, look, I don't know what I'm going to tell my parents actually with this computer science degree because it's not really working out. I don't know if this first year is going to go well. I don't want my grades to tank. A levels were traumatic. And she suggested that I come and sit in on history of art lectures. So I did. And I thought, wow, this is so interesting. This whole history of culture, even though at the time, I mean, I really have to say that it's not like now where things are decolonized and everybody's really thinking of a transnational global history. It was very Western art history centric, African art ethnographic lens framework. But I was so curious about the subject that I just kept sitting in and I tried to take it on as an elective, but it wasn't possible. So I went to see the head of the year and I spoke to her, what would it take for me to actually join this course? Because I can't come on as an elective. But what would it take for me to come on? And they looked at my A-level grades and advised that if I added humanities A-levels, I could come back the year after. So I did that. I did not tell my parents. Very naughty. We had this conversation recently. They were like, wow, you're very brave. I took extra A-levels in psychology and sociology. And I went back. I didn't end up going back to Newcastle. I went to Leeds instead to study history of art because they had a history of art, material culture, architectural history, joint honours type degree. So I ended up doing that. And that was really, 2002, such a long time ago, to 2005. That was the beginning of this journey into art history and curating, which has carried on. I did a BA at Leeds, as I mentioned. I did an MA at the Royal College of Art. I did a PhD in curating at Royal Holloway, University of London. And, one thing that I will say really has shaped my career is that I think before doing this degree, I actually didn't have a curiosity about traveling and learning about different cultures. And the degree really sort of harnessed something in this desire to really think about culture from different perspectives. So I've traveled to all sorts of places. I've traveled to Iran. I've traveled all across the US, Europe, Asia with this career, thinking about the different modes and representation of art history and culture, which is centuries old. And particularly as I progressed in my career, the place of African art and culture within this global history. I would say the traveling isn't a thing in itself, but I think the traveling has allowed me to gain knowledge, because of course when I'm traveling I have to contemplate and deal with different cultural changes, different language barriers as well. So it's not the most accessible thing to arrive in a country and then try to negotiate and try and communicate, and then the things that are lost in translation as well. So that's just something to mention, negotiating the travel with the work. But really, it's about a preservation of legacies, of cultural legacies, cultural histories, artistic production, also particular emphasis on, in my practice anyway, visibility of female artists within this field. Histories of women artists who have been marginalized, who've been overlooked for whatever reason, for a combination of reasons, as we know. So this is something that is very important to the work I do. It's something that I'm passionate about. It's something that, I enjoy just sort of really highlighting the work of female artists in particular, not just African artists overall, but female artists, and particularly Nigerian female artists as well, being a Nigerian woman myself. I enjoy the research. I'm really nerdy. I enjoy digging into research. I enjoy sort of probing into historical accounts that are sometimes inaccurate or haven't sort of given a full picture of this history of culture that I keep speaking about. What are the ways that you can sort of intervene in this field? We're having this conversation because culture and tourism are so interlinked, actually. You really sort of learn about a place through traveling there, but you also sort of can explore it through the culture, which sits outside of everyday life, and has existed for such a long time, as I mentioned previously. So these are the things that I'm also very interested in. What are the ways that culture and travel and tourism intertwine, and also takes this culture outside of us, specialist field. I studied art history. Everything can be very academic in museums, in these buildings, places that are expensive and inaccessible to a lot of people. What are the ways that culture can also permeate outside and be more accessible? And what are the ways as a curator that you can think about working in a way that gives everyone equal access to this culture that has been preserved for so long, or culture that is at risk of disappearing as well? So these are things that really excite me and influence me about what I do. So there's a project that I've been working on this project really started during my MA studies in 2009. I was at a placement at a museum in the north of England, in Middlesbrough, a very small town, but that had a quite substantial ceramics collection. And a lot of museums in the UK, quite a lot of them have a focus on ceramics, crafts, outside of fine art and visual arts. And I came across this object from place at the time that I never heard about, the Pottery Training Centre in Abuja. I'd heard of Ladi Kwali, but I didn't know anything about her life that much beyond just the accolades and, being on 20 Naira Road. I didn't really know anything about her life story. And so this encounter with this object, became this sort of on-off research that I thought, right, next time I'm in Nigeria, I will go and find this Pottery Training Centre, see what's going on. It was established in the 50s. Where's it at now, man? What more can I find out about Ladi Kwali? So this research was ongoing, on, off. I'd have conversations with people about it. I'd, get some information. Most of the time, it was obscure. It's some people knew about her, some people didn't know about her. Beyond the accolades, there wasn't that much to her life story. It took a while, because also I would present it to people and they weren't really interested, or who's Ladi Kwali? She's not really relevant or whatever. So it was a lot of back and forth, back in the project, coming back to it. And so finally last year, I curated this exhibition on Ladi Kwali, looking at this legacy of Nigerian ceramics, but also Nigerian ceramics that then came into this colonial dialectics with British studio pottery. But what is the way to sort of really individualize Ladi Kwali's life story, this form of pottery that is indigenous to Nigeria, indigenous to women of a particular ethnic group? Why don't we know enough about this history? Why isn't more sort of recognition and celebration about this history? So it did the exhibition. It was in London, it was in York Museum and Galleries. And I'm also working on, I'm part of an early career fellowship at the Sahara Centre for British Art to develop substantial writing around Ladi Kwali. There isn't any sort of substantial historical publication on her work. So I'm working towards that. And it's a project that, especially when you're dealing with the posthumous legacy and also a history that is patchy in terms of what's been preserved in the archive, what archive are you looking at, what accounts are available for you to sort of build a research publication project, what are the ways to sort of negotiate these challenges. So that's the project that, I can't believe I'm still doing this project, but there's so much that has kept me going for over 10 years, from research, from traveling to Abuja to find out more about Ladi Kwali, from staging this exhibition, creating a small publication around that, a catalogue. But then also, there's enough that is still sort of driving my motivation to really historicize her contributions to art and culture, not just in Nigeria, but globally. So that's one project that I'm super proud of, still ongoing, keeps going. I think when I read that question, I think that keeps you up at night was, something that really sort of resonated with me, because I spend like months in Nigeria every year, usually for research, to visit family, all of these kinds of things. I'm really seeing like a disparity between, of course, they're really like important, exciting foundations that are privately funded. And then we get to the governmental side, where we sort of see things that really have a long and important legacy that are in decline. And I guess, what is this intervention that bridges this disparity between privately funded and public sector? And also because, when I visited museums in different parts of Nigeria, there are people who have been working there for decades. It's not like it's just people who are in and out who don't care about the work, but there's only so much that you can do when you don't have adequate support and resources. And also, just as we begin to have these conversations, and also infrastructural investment into museums of the future on the continent, or spaces that will preserve this culture, or spaces that will become the houses of repatriated objects, really important topical conversation. What do we do with the things that we have that are in decline? What is a way to sort of save them and salvage them, actually? And also, what is the way to sort of enforce a care towards objects that exist? Because again, it's down to like infrastructure and funding, museum collections or just works that are just preserved in stores that are never on display, because that's probably the best way to preserve them. So these are the things that I sort of think about. And what is my role in sort of, as a curator who's between the UK and West Africa and spending time in Nigeria, what are the ways that I can sort of contribute to this preservation of culture in a meaningful way? This is something that I think about, we sort of, especially in the context of Nigeria, like what does the archive look like today? And what are the ways that we can sort of think about an archive for future generations that exists beyond buildings and beyond sort of the private sector, really? When I was talking about this project that was meaningful and not really knowing so much about Ladi Kwali, and knowing her name but not knowing a lot about her life. And I think this also has to do with the curriculum or what's taught at school, for people who have access to education, and just the place for, I guess, art history and culture within that curriculum. Because actually, I remember, I'm sure you remember going to the National Museum in Onikon. From school, from QC, when we were there. And I tell you, the only thing I remember about that museum from that visit is the assassination of Murtala and the car. I don't remember seeing any objects. In fact, I don't really remember like any of the sort of cultural trips that happened where you go to like National Theatre, see something. I just discovered as an adult that there's a museum at the National Theatre. I never knew there was one there. I don't know how long it's been there, but all of these things, Society of Nigerian Artists, all of these organizations that I didn't have any privy to them growing up. And I know things are different. I know that there is more visibility, more investment, there's more spotlight on African art globally, and people are paying attention. But these things have always been there. Within our ethnic groups, we have an artistic culture. I'm from Delta. There's Cultural Day that happens every year. I never went to that till I was an adult. So instead of like pointing fingers, this doesn't work, government doesn't do that, there are ways that within society that we can really sort of educate ourselves about our culture. What is this thing? What is pottery in Delta State like? What is crafts making like? If there's a way to sort of integrate in a more sort of grassroots, okay, this is our culture. Our culture isn't just language and food. It's also about artistic expression, right? Encouraging more people to come to these things like cultural days where you can sort of engage and see art and artifacts from where you're from. The curriculum is a big one. Because it was sort of art TD or something when we're at school. I have no idea where even art sits within the curriculum. These are also big ones that perhaps begin to promote a sort of wider consciousness around sort of the value of art, because it is our culture. It's the way we communicate it. It's the way we sort of live. It's part of our lived experiences. Pots are functional, they're artistic, carvings were part of different rituals and processions, architecture as well, the way houses were built, the materials being used. So it cuts across different aspects of our lives, and how do we sort of celebrate that and sort of keep it going? Again, let's even talk about the economic value of things like arts and crafts, textiles, weaving, Adire, all of these things, are part of our culture and indigenous to Nigeria. How can we sort of like further enhance that and make it, something to be proud of, that there isn't this sort of, we need the imports, we need to look outside. We have these skills within us that, should be enhanced and contribute economically, actually. The person that has always inspired me, no longer with us, is the late Bissy Silva. Her contribution to the artistic scene in Lagos and beyond was just phenomenal. Establishing CCA Lagos single-handedly with collaborators and relentlessly creating a critical framework for art in Nigeria and across the continent. She continues to inspire me. Oyinda Fakeye, who's taken over, is doing a wonderful job, sort of redeveloping and thinking about the future and longevity of CCA. And all of the, they have a wonderful board of individuals who have kept this legacy going, who have contributed to really sort of securing the future of CCA Lagos, and also just really sort of nurturing such an important space for artistic exchange, collaboration, and development. I think success is also about the interactions you have with intergenerationally, being a mentor or being a mentee. But I think it's important to really have a practice or legacy as a successful individual that is about nurturing, is about sharing, is about enabling the next generation to come, because, there's strength in numbers. And I think that there really shouldn't be this idea of like the solitary person who is on top that doesn't filter down. So these are things that I think about constantly. I think about the ways, people, it's very interesting that you mentioned money and, all of these things. Of course, we need to survive. We need to all sort of contribute and be part of an economy. But giving your time to others is a form of exchange that is valuable, right? Giving your expertise in ways that aren't monetary is something valuable. It might be something as small as forwarding opportunities to artists, are looking for residencies or funding, especially for people who work independently. I work independently. I value so much people who send me opportunities, and I do the same. It might be the case of editing somebody's application. It might be helping them with their artist statement, reviewing a website, these kinds of things that we can do that are, it's investing time in others as we progress in life. This is something that I'm really passionate about and I really care about. And I also I'm grateful to the support that I've had from others actually within this field. BC Silva being a pioneer, doing things before her time. I've spoken about, entering into this field very early on. People say it's brave and stuff, but it was really hard. It's really hard, saying that you're a curator. It's just now that people are actually understanding what a curator is, because then by the time I open my mouth and tell them the profession that I'm doing, I actually have to become a dictionary to break down what curators were, dealing with comments like, oh, really, that you got PhD in curating. And all of these kinds of things. But I've always been very one thing, I'm very committed to what I do, very focused on what I do. And I've, it's what I've always done. I haven't I didn't do anything else and become a curator. It's what I've done: history of art curating, art history, writing, and research. Been doing it for over, it's coming up to 18 years since I graduated. I think I'll stop there. Just, in terms of just, I think it's really important to also have conversations like this, share your trajectory, share your life story. You never know who's listening. You never know what trajectory people are on contemplating this career. I didn't really have a lot of references when I was. So I think it's important to really be very transparent about how you got to where you are. What are the challenges? What are the celebrations and successes, just to give a really well-rounded perspective on what it is we do and how we can nurture and empower others as well whilst we're doing what we do. My dad was an architect for many years. That was also his only career. He did it from when he was a young man till he was 60. He's now 83. I would have loved to follow that trajectory, actually. And at one point, it was something that I was thinking of. I don't know if I'd have made a really good architect, to be honest, but I would have tried harder because, his practice, Niger Consultants, was the practice he was part of was the first indigenous Nigerian architecture firm. It would have been wonderful to be part of that legacy as a female architect, because there's not that many. There are people changing that tide, but that's absolutely, I have no doubt about that. That's what I would have pursued if I didn't enter into this trajectory of curating and art history. I just want to say thank you so much. It was such a rich conversation. I really enjoyed the questions. It was really nice to just also reflect and just think through what you're doing, why you're doing things, how you got there. I think it's important for everyone to do that. And amazing work that you do at the Sahara Centre. Who knows? Let's see. Maybe we do something together in future. I hope so. Bye.